Conflict theory looks to social and economic factors as the causes of crime and deviance. Unlike functionalists, conflict theorists don't see these factors as positive functions of society. They see them as evidence of inequality in the system. They also challenge social disorganization theory and control theory and argue that both ignore racial and socioeconomic issues and oversimplify social trends. Akers, 1991. Conflict theorists also look for answers to the correlation of gender and race with wealth and crime. Karl Marx, An Unequal System. Conflict theory was greatly influenced by the work of 19th-century German philosopher, economist, and social scientist Karl Marx. Marx believed that the general population was divided into two groups. He labeled the wealthy, who controlled the means of production and business, the bourgeoisie. He labeled the workers who depended on the bourgeoisie for employment and survival, the proletariat. Marx believed that the bourgeoisie centralized their power and influence through government, laws, and other authority agencies in order to maintain and expand their positions of power in society. Thus, Marx viewed the laws as instruments of oppression for the proletariat that are written and enforced to maintain the economic status quo and to protect the interests of the ruling class. Though Marx spoke little of deviance, he wrote a great deal about laws and developed a legal theory that created the foundation for conflict theorists. C. Wright Mills, The Power Elite. In his book The Power Elite, 1956, sociologist C. Wright Mills described the existence of what he dubbed the power elite, a small group of wealthy and influential people at the top of society who disproportionately control power and resources. Wealthy executives, politicians, celebrities, and military leaders often have access to national and international power, and in some cases, their decisions affect everyone in society. Because of this, the rules of society are stacked in favor of a privileged few who then manipulate them to maintain their positions. It is these people who decide what is criminal and what is not, and the effects are often felt most by those who have little power. Mills' theories explain why celebrities such as Chris Brown and Paris Hilton, or once powerful politicians such as Eliot Spitzer and Tom DeLay, can commit crimes and suffer little or no legal retribution. Crime, social class, and race. While crime is often associated with the underprivileged, crimes committed by the wealthy and powerful remain an underpunished and costly problem within society. The American Sociological Association's 1939 president Edwin Sutherland coined the term, white-collar crime, in his address, White-Collar Criminality, which was one of the few such addresses to make front-page news. 2. He defined the term as crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of his occupation. Typically, these are nonviolent crimes committed in commercial situations for financial gain, and according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, white-collar crime is estimated to cost the United States more than $300 billion annually. 3. When former advisor and financier Bernie Madoff was arrested in 2008, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission reported that the estimated losses of his financial Ponzi scheme fraud were close to $50 billion. SEC, 2009. In contrast, property crimes, which include burglary, larceny theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson, in 2015 resulted in losses estimated at $14.3 billion. FBI, 2015. Conflict theorists also quickly point out that crime in the suites is often committed by white men, whereas crime in the streets disproportionately affects communities of color as both perpetrators and victims of property crimes. Property crimes have fallen dramatically over the past 20 years. See chart below. It is also important to keep in mind that only 36% of property crimes are reported to police. Crack, cocaine, and opioids. In the 1980s, there was a crack epidemic that swept the country's poorest urban communities. Its pricier counterpart, cocaine, was often the drug of choice for wealthy whites. Most studies show rates of drug use among whites and blacks were similar. From a pharmaceutical standpoint, crack and cocaine are nearly the same in terms of effect. In 1986, federal law mandated that being caught in possession of 50 grams of crack was punishable by a 10-year prison sentence. An equivalent prison sentence for cocaine possession, however, required possession of 5,000 grams. In other words, the sentencing disparity was 1 to 100. New York Times editorial staff, 2011. This inequality in the severity of punishment for crack versus cocaine paralleled the class and race of the respective users. A conflict theorist would note that those in society who hold the power make the laws concerning crime that benefit their own interests, while the powerless classes who lack the resources to make such decisions suffer the consequences. Thus, since powder cocaine use was associated with wealthy whites, the laws were enacted to be lenient on powder cocaine but extremely punitive toward crack cocaine. The crack cocaine punishment disparity remained until 2010, when President Obama signed the Fair Sentencing Act, which decreased the disparity to 1 to 18. The Sentencing Project, 2010. Today, we are in the midst of an opioid epidemic. Unlike the 1980s crack epidemic, the opioid epidemic is considered a public health crisis and has widespread support for prevention and treatment programs. Since disproportionate numbers of drug overdose deaths have been among white Americans, conflict theorists would suggest that those in power are more likely to advocate policy changes to help these drug addicts rather than punish them. Why are whites more likely to overdose? The answer, ironically, might be racism. Studies show that doctors are more reluctant to prescribe painkillers to minorities because they mistakenly believe minority patients feel less pain and/or are more likely to misuse or sell the prescribed drugs.